Historically, environmental science advances most when examining the intersection of disciplines that were previously studied independently. Today, energy developers and regulators are rapidly deploying massive networks of electrical and radio frequency infrastructure into oceans, waterways, and coastal environments. The predictive models used to permit these projects rely almost entirely on engineering. They accurately calculate physical load and signal attenuation, but they often operate independently of marine biology. This creates a point of scientific uncertainty. As the literature notes, the absence of definitive proof of harm is not the same thing as proof of no harm. If we fail to synthesize radio frequency physics with the sensory mechanisms of marine life, we risk ignoring variables that may eventually impact environmental risk assessments. To evaluate this uncertainty, we have to stop treating the marine environment as empty space and recognize it as a complex, invisible topography. Long before we arrive, these waters are already saturated with naturally occurring electromagnetic forces. Two distinct variables are about to disrupt this space: native aquatic organisms and human-generated infrastructure. To assess project liability, we must build this ecosystem from the ground up and observe where these two forces collide. The first variable is biological. The ability of numerous aquatic species to detect electric and magnetic fields is a documented biological reality. Apex predators, like this hammerhead, use specialized sensory systems to detect the weak electrical signals generated by prey. Other species, including salmon and eels, utilize geomagnetic information to navigate complex, long-distance migrations. Recent tracking data across vastly different ecological niches, including sea turtles, penguins, and whales, documented a distinct, repeated circling behavior. One hypothesis suggests this circling allows animals to gather environmental information, potentially reading local magnetic field cues to orient themselves. The baseline ocean is a rich data network of electromagnetic signals that aquatic life utilizes for orientation and survival. The second variable is human engineering. We are placing subsea transmission cables directly into the sensory network. Government agencies acknowledge that anthropogenic electromagnetic fields can be detected by certain aquatic species, influencing behavior under some conditions. To test the actual behavioral response, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory conducted specific, controlled laboratory exposures. Researchers subjected native invertebrates, like the Dungeness crab, to electromagnetic fields comparable to those expected from certain human-made sources. They also ran targeted exposures on highly valuable commercial species, including the Atlantic halibut. Researchers found no clear evidence of strong attraction or avoidance, but did observe statistically significant changes in how these species utilized space and managed their activity levels. While artificial infrastructure alters native animal behavior, the broader ecological significance of these interactions remains incompletely understood. To compound the biological uncertainty, we have to consider the specific engineering variables occurring at the water's surface. This diagram illustrates standard predictive modeling. On land, engineers assume radio frequency signals will degrade predictably, radiating outward in a smooth spherical wave. Over water, surface characteristics alter signal behavior. IEEE research notes water acts as an efficient reflector, creating multipath propagation and localized areas of elevated field strength. Furthermore, Navy guidance details atmospheric ducting, where overwater anomalous propagation results in signal levels exceeding standard predictions. Global health organizations recognize that reflective surfaces and terrain can drastically influence the spatial distribution of radio frequency exposure. Applying land-based physics to marine infrastructure can lead to localized, unpredictable spikes of electromagnetic energy across the environment. This diagram brings these variables together. We have sensitive biological organisms navigating through environments where signal propagation is often nonlinear and amplified. Government researchers identify significant knowledge gaps here, specifically regarding how these exposures affect the navigation and habitat use of juvenile life stages. We also lack baseline data on the cumulative effects of multiple infrastructure sources operating simultaneously in the same aquatic environment. Without that data, the long-term ecological consequences and population-level implications remain active areas of scientific investigation. This intersection, where biological sensitivity meets unpredictable physical propagation, generates a state of scientific uncertainty for developers and regulators. The current scientific literature does not state that artificial electromagnetic fields have been proven harmful to aquatic ecosystems. However, the literature confirms that biological detection mechanisms exist, that infrastructure can influence behavior, and that water bodies alter exposure patterns. Historically, environmental liabilities often become material concerns after infrastructure has already been deployed at scale and new data becomes available. Unresolved scientific uncertainty represents a material consideration for investors, developers, insurers, and regulators. Relying solely on the absence of definitive proof of harm as a long-term strategy may represent a significant oversight in project valuation. Mitigating this uncertainty requires a refined baseline for infrastructure due diligence. Evaluation should move beyond generalized predictive modeling. Prudent planning warrants site-specific measurements to account for how local waterways modify electromagnetic propagation. Project sites require auditing to identify species within the area that are known to utilize electroreception or magnetoreception. Permitting outcomes should incorporate cumulative electromagnetic source evaluations and long-term monitoring strategies into upfront project planning. Where biological complexity meets scientific uncertainty, proactive site-specific evaluation is essential for environmental stewardship and effective risk management.